for Monday was the people have moved into their cottage, they're settled, and then they have the information that the farmers market's on Monday. I think that was
And maybe it's a marketing issue. I wonder if enough renters, et cetera, know that there is a farmer's market happening down there.
So that was going to be my comment as well. I think Monday is a good day and maybe some additional marketing. Well, I will say, since I work, I have a problem that it's over by the time I'm done with work. So
I personally would love to see it actually a little later on Monday even. I vended at a market, usually in Montana, I vended at a market there. There was an evening market, like a 5 to 7:30 market, and it was the most hopping market I've ever been to.
I think that.
I think too, exactly. I drive home, it's 5 o'clock, and I don't know what time they close, but I'm going, whoa, you know, I'm not going to get home.
This one was 2 to 5.
Yeah.
I think 5, that's an interesting idea because then you're.
Even like 4 to 6:30 or something,
Yeah.
it gets a little.
So for those of us that work, then I've never had the ice cream. You know,
That's a
This
shame.
morning.
but it's always over by the time I'm done with work. So I think if it could go a little later, then,
Start with it.
yeah, it might be
Start it later.
I think, I don't hear anybody saying it's a bad idea, so are we looking for a motion?
I guess we're looking for, if you have, you have all of your ducks lined up in terms of the financial and insurance needs, and you're talking to potential vendors, then the onus is really upon you to put it together. I think we are looking for a motion to approve. Paul?
Rose was contemplating, and we discussed and approved her bringing in different microbreweries.
Oh, okay.
So I guess we're still,
No.
we didn't approve that.
I don't recall ever having
we
a
did
discussion.
discuss
We
it.
did. We
We
discussed
may have had a discussion,
And
I
I
don't.
deferred to this year, actually.
I believe it was approved.
Yeah.
So we have to go through the minutes.
Are there liabilities coming upon us?
I believe that there was some reason why she backed away, which to do with something to do with state.
Wait, first of all, do you have any interest in bringing in a brewery, a microbrewery?
I don't have
If
a
you
problem with it.
don't-
I feel like it would require, so Rose was suggesting that there's really only space for like 5 or 6 vendor tents
Right,
there.
if that's not an option for you, we don't need to discuss it.
I guess I would prefer not to pursue it this year, you know, let me
It's your
move
first
forward
year.
with what we have. And I think if there's gonna be brewery, there should be regular prepared food vendors as well. You know, if it's gonna be more of a dinner thing, like come in and grab a beer, grab some prepared food for dinner. And so is there space for all of
There's
that?
a great
Yeah. So Vicki,
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the going forward with the farmer's market on Monday, with the caveat that you come back with the details and the insurance papers and all of that before you start.
Second.
and that's seconded by, any further discussion?
I have a question. Do we have to waive the rent?
Have to?
No, I mean, in the motion, if we want to waive the rent, do we?
I think why we established the rent in the beginning was to make sure that the place was cleaned up. The cars were moved and put out of the way because of parking issues and that stuff, and everything seemed to go smooth. She kept it clean, so I believe the board decided to waive that part of it because that's why we started.
Seems reasonable.
Same thing, don't raise any problems.
I'd like to know start and finish dates and hours of operation.
Well, I'm not sure what that last Monday in June is. I'm not sure the date.
I think it's the 23rd.
You can find it out quickly.
So the last Monday in June through
You wanna
Labor
wait
Day
till then?
weekend is the 3rd.
You want to wait till then?
Your 26th.
That's the recommendation I've been told, that it just isn't busy enough for it to be worthwhile until the tourist summer folks.
So last Monday in June is
The 25th.
after this group meets, which means that at our next meeting, which is on June 17th, we'd like you to attend and to have the final details for us in terms of hours of operation, open, close, who the vendors are.
Is that meeting in the morning?
No, same time as this.
I can tell you, my family's biking the trek. That's the last day of the trek.
Okay, then in advance of that, please
Be in touch.
keep in touch.
Yeah.
Who should I send it to Amy?
Send to
That's
Amy,
the
and
email
Amy
I
can
have.
circulate to us who the vendors are, start and stop times, days, your plans for marketing, if they're going to be any different, where you put signage. Anything Anything else,
Are
Steve?
we still discussing?
Yes, we're still discussing.
And I would say, as vendors, you know, if it changes, I mean, vendors don't have to be cast in stone, but the starting vendors,
Oh, right.
right? So if you get somebody else, whatever, I think that's appropriate.
Yeah, Rose said she had some guest vendors periodically last year that came and went, so.
By the way, thank you very much
Yeah, you're
for
welcome.
doing
Thank
this
you.
and for approaching us.
I'm excited. It's really hard to get into farmers markets around here, so this is a great opportunity.
Thank you.
Are you going through Labor Day?
That would be the last,
Labor Day?
yeah, that Monday is.
Labor Day
the-
weekend.
Mhm.
And Samantha, do you have Amy's contact information? Does she
I have
yours?
Amy's
That's fine.
email with, is that
Yeah,
sufficient?
okay.
Yeah.
And so insurance certificates and all that fun
Sure.
stuff, if you have that done, get it to her, then she keeps track of that for us.
That's nice.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.
yeah.
Thank you very much.
I'll
Good
be
luck on the
set.
trip.
All right,
Thank you.
and are we now,
We go-
Yes,
what do you think about
hi,
that?
I'm Ned Leitner, and I've been the volunteer filmer of your meetings, and I just wanted to apologize for last month when I completely forgot. And so I was wondering, is there any possibility, you guys all stay in communication with the meetings, I should know this, I should put it on my calendar, but is there any possibility that I could get an email just to remind me of any
then I'll send you the
changes and
list
stuff?
of our.
Because I hate being a screw-up, and anything you can do to help me with that is a good thing.
Right,
And this morning I discovered that there was a power cord missing in the other camera, so I ran back. And so that's for the folks watching. We missed, what, about 3 minutes of the meeting. I hope nothing pivotal was decided, but anyway, so that's why I'm coming before
your
you.
salary was.
Ask your humble apologies for things.
You need a vote actually on that, we haven't had a vote, we had discussion. All in favor of Samantha Langlois' proposal, what was the actual,
To go forward with planning for the farmer's market with the caveat that she gives us the final details, but she can move forward and we're on.
and the second, all in favor? And it's unanimous. There's been a discussion that has been presented to me by an overseer that we start to think about the people who are village employees. I'm looking left and right here to Bill and to Amy particularly, although I guess you would have get a part-time fee or something like that as the treasurer. And how we can best help you through time in terms of assistance or how your job is defined and other ways in which we might be able to help you out. So I'm just letting both of you know that we're going to, I'd like to start a discussion this summer, I will say, on ways in which your job can be codified and we can look down the road and say, and how does it grow and change over time. And so we're just going to, you obviously, each of you will be at the center of those discussions, but it would be a foolish organization to say, well, we have these two people who are just going to do these jobs exactly as they're done today in perpetuity for all time. It's not going to be that way. We all change. The people change around. The overseers, the president changes, the treasurer changes, everything changes. And so we need to make sure that we're being cognizant of what your needs are and how your jobs are changing also. So we'll have those discussions, I would say, starting this summer.
That's basically how to be a better employer, right? Employer. Yeah.
Yes. I will take that upon myself to do that. Yes.
Because we have a huge amount of value to the, particularly Amy and Billy. And, you know, they're so important to the running of the village that we want to do what is right and not just accept it that, hey, that's the way it is. We need to work at keeping it better.
Mm-hmm.
I say that okay?
And I think as you're doing this investigation, John, involving someone who's specifically from the utilities board, I think would be a good idea. Because the utilities, I do believe, has a larger employee base than the village itself.
Good point. Thank you. Mr. Treasurer,
Well, good morning.
welcome
all.
back.
Thank you, nice to be back. So some warrants for your approval. So you've all received the March year-to-date financials, and there's a copy in front of you of the April. It is an uncommented copy because I've been severely pressed for time since the beginning of the year. I will send you a final commented version, but I guess the lion's share of the answer is there's nothing of major concern at this time. The missing splits I mentioned in March have all been corrected. That brings a number of budget items that were grossly overspent back into line to where they belong. I do not understand why the accountants didn't split them as they should have, when they should have, because they've done it correctly for 2 or 3 years, and this year, for some reason, didn't happen. The primary reason is nothing of major concern is that you guys did an awesome job budgeting last year, so thanks. The budget reflects the way we run the village, so there's very little to comment on. I had given you an estimated variance report earlier this year, and that still reflects, for the most part, our current financial situation. There have been a number of things that are in the process of changing. I'm going to meet with Bill after this meeting to see if I can understand them all. But we do have some unusual expenses for seawall and causeway repair and repairs to the truck. So we've spent some money we don't normally spend. It's nothing to be alarmed about, but I'm not prepared to tell you what the impact is on budget in general. So in terms of old business, there are a bunch of emails that have come around from the infrastructure committee, primarily recommending an approach to budgeting and keeping our infrastructure up.
Let me take this.
And what I wanted to do is just say that we still have a lot of money left that was carried over by a vote of the village taxpayers that can be used for some of these projects. So I have a couple of specific recommendations. I see no reason not to begin the proactive wharf maintenance that was recommended by that committee to start in 2019. We should absolutely put that on the books to do that this year. From what I can see, we have that money. It's, from memory, $3,000 or $4,000 more than was originally in the budget, so that would be a good use of those funds. I would make an effort to complete the road work on Upper Maple and Oak Streets, or at least one of those projects using those funds, because we still have them. And that means we don't have to factor those into future budgets. We have some cash right now for a bunch of good reasons that we won't go through again, but we have the opportunity to start that work immediately from where I sit. And depending upon financial performance during the year, think about spending the remainder of those funds by accelerating the proactive wharf maintenance. So that's, again, a fairly small number, but we might be able to do a couple years' worth of catch-up in this current year, if that's what makes sense. But a couple of things that I recommend.
What are we talking dollars and cents on the road maintenance? Just what was recently recommended by
So those
our
two
committee?
projects, if you did those two projects alone, West Street and Clinton Street, it was $11,300 for West and $6,800 for Clinton.
So that's what you're referring to? Okay. Did you include the reserve that we recommended?
No.
That's still to be determined, I guess.
So what I'm asking or recommending is, we have funds that were carried over that were authorized for use for infrastructure projects. They aren't designated to be put away for future reserves. It said if we have things that we should do, let's do them.
But that was 31,000, wasn't it?
About, yeah.
Yeah.
And we still have a little bit of contingency left that could be used that way. And I'll talk about that more in detail next month, but right now, we haven't touched the 31,000. The contingency 21,000 is covering electrical, which hasn't started yet, the window replacement, so that's done, and it seems to be something else in that bucket, but don't have a tip of tongue.
Yeah.
So, and something to think about. It takes some planning and time. We just wanted to get that on the table, so the infrastructure committee could think about that and get that in action.
Think about which?
Doing those projects I just recommended.
Yeah. Good, good.
And then with regard to budgets, Wendy, thanks for putting together the safety budget, appreciate it. We have a budget workshop scheduled for Saturday, June 16th at 8 a.m. I will have everything completed and to you in advance. There might be a few loose ends, so at least you can take a look at it. I'll take the same approach I took last year, which is just highlighting increases or decreases. Many of the things don't change hardly at all, so it isn't material to worry about. But to give you an opportunity to look at it and decide if you're more or less comfortable and focus the questions so we can make that meeting as short as possible. There is one piece, though, that I'd like you to have now as you start thinking about what we're going to do during the budget season. This is a quick assessment of tax implications for the budget based upon what I have seen for information so far. And I'll start by saying it's a work in progress. It isn't gospel. It's sort of a, if we were to approve a budget today exactly as written here, there are some changes that would take place. So at the upper part is the budget increase requested by different areas. So in the case of safety, Wendy's recommended a $4,472 increase. That would increase the tax on a property assessed at $250,000 by $12.64. And that's what I would call a permanent increase, meaning that we would want to do that in the years to come. We've got hydrant rental in there. Once you put the hydrants in, we rent them going forward. The West and Clinton Street projects, and I may have gotten these messed up with 19 and 20, but if we were to do those, if we were to budget for those projects, the West Street project will cost an average taxpayer, again, average defined as $250,000 assessed value of $32. Clinton Street would cost $20. And then the wharf, and this is just the additional funds for proactive maintenance, which in year one was $4,000. It bounces around a little bit, but still close enough, would be $11.31. So again, if we were to approve a budget today that was unchanged with the exception of these additions, we would need to increase taxes for a property assessed at $250,000 by $75.11.
Now, that's if we don't borrow any of that money, right?
If we borrowed, it would change some things too.
Yeah.
But yeah, this assumes we can't fit it into the existing budget, and that the preferred approach, and I'm not saying this is the right thing to do, would be just to raise taxes to get it done.
Steve, weren't you just recommending that the West and the Clinton Street come out of the prior?
Well, I may have, and let me pull up Mike's note.
I thought you specifically referred to those.
Indicates Maple and Oak as
Yeah,
being
so
the highest
Maple,
priority.
so Maple and Oak would be done this year. This was stuff he had originally recommended for 2020.
I see, it's his
So I moved
second
this
priority.
to
I understand.
2019.
I see, you bumped it up a year.
Yeah. And I apologize for not having that. This came late, obviously.
Fine, okay, now I understand.
So I don't need answers, don't want answers, just want you to have the information to work with as you think about budgets. And the assumptions in here, the projects require an increase in taxes. I don't know that to be true. We may save some money in other places and not need to do all these increases. The impact on taxes, as I mentioned, is based on a $250,000 valuation. It does not address reserves for paving, Paul, to your point, I didn't put those in there. Safety and wharf are what I view as being permanent increases, just meaning that we would continue with proactive maintenance on the wharf for a while, so it's a tax increase, it wouldn't be a one-time event. That the safety changes, we could pay a little bit more for police going forward, we have some rental going forward, both good things in my mind. It just means that would be an increase we have to factor in the budget year after year.
So just a comment on that, 1,500 of that is removing a hydrant, so I don't think that's the full increased cost.
Year after year, you're
I'm
saying.
sorry, I don't understand.
Yeah, year after year, so I think $1,500 and the $4,400 is for removing an old fire hydrant. So I think it's closer to $2,900 than
So
the current
when
amount.
you say removing a hydrant, you're talking physical removal of the hydrant?
About one of the old fire pump hydrants, and I can explain that.
That's utility expense.
No, it's not, it's an overseas expense, we can talk about that now with the.
Those are all held as an asset of utilities. And long-term projects that are not included here that we don't want to lose sight of. The seawall, I have no idea what the costs on that are. That's something we'll have as the year goes on. Paving Upper Main was put in as $90,000. So if that's something the overseers decided they wanted to do, we would probably have to figure out how to fund that. Repaving village roads, the scope of Mike's document included $35,000 in the next 2 or 3 years. I don't know if that's enough to repave or not, but it's a number out there that the infrastructure committee had recommended we have set aside, so I put it in there for you to think about. And the last piece is, so you look at things, and most budgets ebb and flow. Some expenses come down, so you can spend money on other things as the years go forward. For the last 3 years, we've had a benefit from the bond refunding that has saved us interest that has been used for infrastructure projects. It worked out very well for us. That expires in 2019. And the net effect is, if you look at if everything else was identical, and you look at our contingency budget for this year, which is $22,000, that will decrease by $7,000 based upon our now needing to repay or begin to pay again interest on that loan. So we have a tighter budget than we did this year.
Is there an interest change on the bond?
There was an interest change 3 years ago, when they refunded the bond. And the benefit to us was by forgiving interest payments for about 3 years.
So now we'll be paying interest.
We'll continue to pay interest, but now that interest is a lower rate than it was before.
Which is what, 3%?
I could look it up for you, I don't know.
Thereabouts.
Don't have that answer.
Questions for Steve?
So that's it.
Steve, just a reminder, since we are on camera, to say it again more clearly that the public is invited. The budget workshop is Saturday, June 16th at 8 a.m. right here. Right now, are there any overseers who think they cannot attend that? Vicki and Wendy. And Lee?
I'm not sure I can make it.
I'll have to check with my number.
So
What time?
it's 8 a.m. on Saturday, June 16th. Steve, if we have a potentially 3 or 4 overseers in attendance, not the full group, are there notes out of that workshop that we wanting to get back to people? We have our scheduled overseers meeting the next day. We'll be able to turn around and be able to report out appropriately from that workshop. That's a workshop. Is that meant to make decisions upon which the full overseers will vote the next day?
Yeah, I mean, most efficient way to do it is to have the budget workshop and sort of wail and gnash through the questions you have. And then the next day, you might still have a few residual questions, but the budget's ready to be approved. And with a little bit of luck, it's approved because you did all that pre-work. Last year, when I did this, I left the meeting and I spent a fair amount of time on Saturday pulling information together to have it ready for Sunday morning. So there's very little time. I mean, I would have it done, obviously, but whether it would get to people in time for them to actually review it with the notes. And I mean, that requires a different approach, which is to really document all the stuff we discussed versus just correct the spreadsheet we work with. So
my question is, would we want all the overseers, and certainly those who will not be in attendance, to be perhaps submitting questions or issues in advance to you, such that they can be in a proxy way represented at that meeting?
yeah, I think that'd be fine. What I would like to do is have a couple weeks in advance the budget worksheet to all the overseers. So Wendy's going to talk about safety, for example, in a while, I assume. And if the discussion here today is great, we understand it, we're fine, that's something you need to touch base on, it's done. You know, I don't think anybody's going to question me about payroll taxes and what gets budgeted. So it's really, I think that final meeting is really a question of, we sort of have a wish list of things we'd like to budget. There are costs associated with those. Are those acceptable costs? And is that what we want to present to the voters?
So I'm bringing this up only because I agree it would be to our benefit if we could come out of the June 17th meeting next day with an agreed upon budget. But if there's going to be several people not attending that budget workshop the day before, I want to make sure your voices are heard and you have a chance to weigh in, as that may have to be in advance. So just letting you know that. Anything else for Steve? Paul?
I'm endorsing it, signing a check here for $3,000 to the village for rent. Now, how does that work? Who's paying the rent?
The utilities pay rent to the village.
Even though it's a village check?
Well, it's not, it should not be a village check. I think you'll find that that's in one of the utilities.
Village or the water department, okay.
So that's the water department share of rental.
Okay.
There was also a note, I believe, regarding whether payment would be made, final payment for the installation of the final windows upstairs. Is that part of these?
I assume the check is there, I don't know.
It should be in there, I haven't looked at it.
But as far as you know, that was processed.
Yeah.
Thank you, that's all, just following up on that. Anything else for Steve? Let's move along. Report of the village agent, Mr. Page.
You'll see me just finish up the windows. The windows upstairs are all done. While the guy was here, we had talked about it before, I had him go ahead, and I think it's a $45 expense, extra that he's gonna charge us. To put a pulley in that top window on the back of the building, and he made the sash and things so the window moves real easy. So you can open that top window from down on the stage now, and it works. The only thing that we might have to do is figure out how to get a screen on the outside of the window to help let some of that air, the hot air. I had him do it while he was here because he was already up there, so
Thank you.
it made more sense.
But we can't lock it, right?
Well,
Not that anybody's gonna break it.
who's gonna climb way up to the top of the community hall and break it in that way? They can get in easier,
And why?
you know.
I think there are other windows that are preferred.
But we don't want the snow to get in.
Well, you know, we'll have to look at putting a screen on the outside of the building for that purpose. The police cruiser's all set, ready to go. New inspection sticker, new tie rod, inner tie rod, new 4-tire alignment. So we're all set to go with that. The only thing is near the end of June, I'll have to re-register it, but that's up and going. I keep moving it around a little bit right now. The speed sign that we bought last year, I've had that up for almost a week now. It's set up a little different than normal because I made it flash and stuff, so all I'm doing is that's a reduced speed sign, just trying to make people aware of what their actual speed is. So that's why it's flashing so much.
I was very impressed.
Likewise.
Yeah, so
I
that,
read 85 when I was.
well, I got it set so you can't do that on there. It shuts off at a certain higher
It looks
speed
great, and it does the job.
to help people so they don't
It
try
does
to
get your attention.
run it.
I think it's a great sign.
One thing with that is I would like to look into, and I don't think they're that much, we need to get some more brackets for that so I can leave these brackets up that hold it to the signpost permanently. A lot easier for me to just go around, set it on, lock it on, and go. Now I have to take everything all apart, go to the next place, put it all back together. I don't know what the expense on that, probably not
Sure,
very
it's less than
much.
$500, so you
Yeah,
want to
right.
So,
What's the battery life on that bill?
well, I've had it going a week. You know, depends on how much traffic, you know, how much it actually comes on.
It's rechargeable?
And it's rechargeable, yeah. It takes a little bit of paying attention to set it up on the computer and that, and I have talked with Tony, our tree warden, who's into electronics. Maybe someday we'll come down and have him look at it with us to see if we're doing it, kind of show us some shortcuts, so it's not so much time consuming to reprogram it to the next spot and to get some of the logs off that we need to get off to see what traffic's doing. But I think it's going to work good. The park benches, I think I told you last time that we replaced the one that was down by the yacht club that the cement was all going on. So there is a new park bench and it's moved over into the center of between the treatment plant and the yacht club. It's hard now to find somebody to do the engraving in the boards, you know, in memory of.
So, Bill, we'll talk about that, I think, under new
Okay,
business.
all right.
Lace concrete or?
Yeah, it's a whole brand new thing. It's just like the other ones, but all brand new. I have a estimate here, and I don't know. I think I would like to see if there might be some volunteers in the community or something like that to do this. I got a thing here for $45 per hour to replace, I think, about 20 loose or broken bolts on the bench boards now. But their explanation is if the bolt breaks, which they're all had, I've tried to turn it myself and I haven't been able to, they have to re-drill out the cement and put new anchors in the cement, put new bolts in, and they're talking over an hour to do that. So I'm like a little leery with that, at $45 an hour. It's kind of open-ended, we don't know what it's gonna be.
I'll see if I can get some people to volunteer to work that issue.
Yeah, because I think it would be better for, you know, kind of as a community thing, people helping out a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I think that could end up being, we're gonna break the delivery. Yeah, that's my word. The other thing is we had the, where the storm drain goes over wood down in Ruggles Park. We had the hot top area, I kind of was watching it and it was sagging a little bit. We finally had that collapse. So I had to do an emergency repair on that. The culvert that's in there that runs from the seawall back to up about where we put the boat float to that catch basin, I believe is all galvanized pipe, and the bottom, you know, the whole half of the bottom of the culvert is gone. And the water's been getting out and working around, so it made the road collapse. So I got that repaired. The only thing, we gotta come back and put hot top back in it. And the way the date, I want it to settle a little bit. I'm hoping maybe to do that after Memorial Day weekend.
Where is that located?
Right in Ruggles Park in the circle.
Bill, do we need a new culvert there?
I think that we need to replace it from where we stopped. I put 40 feet in, all the way back up through, but that's gonna be an awful big expense. We're over $2,000 just for that 40-foot section now. You know, it's expensive, and that doesn't include putting the hot top back or any of that, and that's a little over $2,000, so. It may go faster on that longer run, but this was an emergency, so we had to pay a little bit more cost for the emergency setup fee to get here.
Please.
Is that the plastic culverts?
That's what I replaced it with, yes. I'm replacing it with plastic. I thought years ago when they done the storm drain system, if you look in the storm drain, up by where the boat float is, it's plastic going out. You look down on the beach, it's plastic coming up through the seawall. So they only put a 20-foot section from the seawall, out by the sea, back. From there up, it's galvanized and it's all gone. It's been in there for over 20 years, so it's all gone. So the road, I'm keeping an eye on it, but, you know, if it starts to sag down, then that's going to be an indication that it's going to collapse, so.
You might check through Dick McElhaney and some of this trenchless stuff. You know, they might be able to pull a slightly smaller culvert through the old one,
Yeah,
or something of that sort.
Right.
They did that on my road. They pulled a smaller plastic one up through the galvanized one. It hasn't totally collapsed.
Yeah. The only thing is, I don't think we want to make that, well, we'd have to check with them, but we don't want to make that culvert much smaller than it is now, because there's a lot of water, goes through there. It serves a big area.
Yeah, that takes all of Main Street.
Yeah, well, it takes all,
Everything comes down.
it takes everything all the way up to Marathon Square
Yeah.
and up Clinton Street and all that. It takes a lot of stuff in, so.
How wide is the current one? The galvanized one?
15 inch, I believe. Yeah. So we're putting 15-inch plastic back.
Unless it fails before, I think we can defer that till we do the wall.
Well, that's kind of what I'm trying to hope to do, but I just wanted to bring it up that, you know, if I start to see it failing in the roadway again, you know, we will have to do something with it. Because we're not going to want to walk off down to the park. Moving on.
Wait, Vicki?
Well, speaking of roads, and it's not out of turn, but did you notice that at the corner of Griffin and George, where the snow plow took out that part of the, you know, that curve, that
paint curb that they put around there. Did you ever notice that? Did you?
Yes, up on the top, yeah.
Well, if I'm looking down,
Yeah,
okay,
it's
the
on
new
the right.
house is here, it's right over here on this
Right
one.
on the right, yeah.
Yeah, right on the right.
But I got taken out right a few years ago.
Oh,
and
well,
when-
more of it got taken
And,
out this.
well, when the company come to do Maple Street, we had to put one back in,
And then took it out.
and it gets taken out again. That's a tough spot. I mean, the snowplow, it's so tight, it's tough to get down that street.
Yeah, I just wondered if you'd seen that, that's all.
You know, the wing hits it and breaks it out.
Yeah, well, don't replace it then.
Well, I'm kind of looking, if it's a problem with runoff there, I'm kind of looking into maybe putting in a stone one right there on that corner. That way it won't close back.
I just wondered if
we're
you've
aware
seen
of
it, as long as you've seen it, it's.
Just like the catch basin on both sides broke. Moving on from that, the fence going into Bayview Park has been replaced, and I believe it's all painted. Not sure about the caps on top, but that's all done. The playground, they have taken the stuff out and put new mulch and crusher dust around the merry-go-round. I talked to the guy, one of the workers the other day, and I says, I hope he remembers he has to do under the swing sets, because we always do the swing sets the same time we do the merry-go-round. So, I'm still dealing with that. That's not quite totally done with that. What else is going on? There's probably some other things that I forgot.
Paul?
Oh, I had a question for Steve. Sorry, I can wait.
Okay.
I was talking with the Joanna and Don Knotts next door to our Clinton Street project, and they were very appreciative of your efforts, kind of helping them through their first winter in Bayside.
Yeah.
I wanted to pass that along.
That's a tough area.
Yeah.
We got to look at that bottom of that hill a little bit about coming up with some kind of solution there. I'm tearing it up a little bit with a plow because I like to push the snow up against there as a barrier, so when it freezes, in case we have the problem of sliding down the hill, going down to the bank again. I don't know if there's anything else that we could really do there, because all the snow has to go there.
Bill, actually, speaking of that, this was the winter, the first winter, where we were asked to plow at the top of Auditorium Park to accommodate that couple who was staying there with the baby on. How did that work out?
It was as difficult as I figured it was going to be. We did have to spend, I think we spent like $700 to have the crew come in and refix up along that roadway, you know, to get everybody back in shape through there, because it just damaged, you know, it just damaged their lawns and stuff. The one problem I had, which was that really sharp corner and pushing that heavy snow and had ice under it. As you know, that's when the truck slid over and went over a rock and took out the running board on the truck. So that cost us, what, $500-600. You know, it's not an easy road to plow.
Right.
The weather this year, we had a lot of times when it would warm up considerably. The ground up near, as you come up near Auditorium Park where the hot top is, got really soft, and the guy has a truck and he really rutted it up pretty bad in that area, the dirt area.
The people who were staying there?
People who were staying there. It's just tough to do that. It's doable, you know, we got through the winter. It did cost us a little extra with, you know, some road maintenance and damage to the vehicle and that, but believe I kept them happy once we got started. I didn't hear any more.
Thank you.
I
Thank you
didn't
very
hear
much.
any more complaints from anybody. It wasn't that great. Oh, and there's been another thing, Matt, now that you mentioned that, maybe I'll just throw it out there now, it's nothing you have to decide on now. So, somebody we all know keeps approaching me about plowing Pleasant Street. That's from George Street to Broadway,
Which is dirt.
which is dirt. Nobody lives on that street in the wintertime. But it keeps that person keeps coming to me about having it plowed. Just wanted to put it out there so you guys can.
And I would say, nobody lives there, and again, the protocol is if somebody's there year-round, and there are many other streets that, whatever person that is, it's got to be a person on one end or the other, can take as opposed to Pleasant Street. I just think that's a illogical request.
If this person keeps approaching you, Bill, feel free to refer them to the overseers. They are welcome to come here to one of our monthly meetings and to present their case to the overseers. You should not have to keep handling this on a regular basis.
Okay, all right. I see Scott Monroe has finally got his float in. Hopefully, he's got us in mind to get us in before Memorial Day with our floats and stuff. I haven't been able to talk to him yet. This past week was very busy with the infrastructure, the seawall, the work that I had to do with the water department and excavators and stuff. So I've been very busy this last week.
But we sent him a note so he knows of our interests. I know tides have to be coordinated with that.
Yeah, and but I know he just got his float in, so we're getting close. So hopefully he gets to us.
Is there any value in having me or anyone from this office recontact him, or is it basically on his schedule and we just have to wait?
No, let me talk to him first. I haven't had a chance to catch up with him. As I say, I wanted to last week, but I just got overwhelmed with everything that's going on. I think that's it. I think that's all I have.
Any questions for Bill? Is everything so good? I see, by the way, in our committee reports, Bill, that we're under infrastructure, it says, and I put in there electrical improvements to town hall. We do have the other two infrastructure issues regarding dirt roads and the wharf. And so maybe now's the time to just address the fact that I believe no one responded to our interest in having an electrician come and do the updates.
Right. We put a bid package out for the electrical upstairs, and I also got on the telephone and I called, because I knew that might not get us, I called 14 electricians all around, Belfast, Lincolnville, Belmont, Thornville, all those areas, Salesport. A lot of them said no, they didn't want the bid package because they was too busy. The economy's good, they're all busy. They'd rather do new installs for new houses. It's a lot cleaner work than pulling stuff out and putting stuff back. Out of the 14, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We had 6 take out bid packages, but not one of them got back to us. So I got a feeling they were all too busy. The only other thing that I thought of was Mike had made out this thing that the time frame that he had on there was probably too tight for him, because he wanted this work done by June. So that might be. So I think what we've decided is I'm going to go back and revisit some of these ones who took out applications on an individual basis to feel them out and to see if they are interested in it, but maybe later on in the fall or whatever, we'll try that route instead of rebidding it again.
Thank you.
See what we get.
Okay.
So that's where we are on the electrical. Then Because the other thing, we had the walkthrough with the people from down Portland for the seawall. That went very, very well, we thought. We brought them up here, showed them pictures, showed them Dick Brockway's display. They were very impressed with all that stuff. I'm glad they came up because I think it gives them a better perspective of what we were talking about with that seawall. So they, the design and stuff, may get a better response. So their next step, I believe, this coming week, they're sending up the surveyor to take some survey points around, all around the park area and down, which will make things go much easier down the road. So that's kind of where we are on that one. Then we done a Mike Lennon and myself and Dean Brown. We went around and you guys have all seen it on the road.
Yeah, let's save those two reports for the infrastructure committee, I think.
We done all that and more stuff, so that's kind of where we're at. Oh, one thing, I'll just see it again. I looked back and it was $1,000 to replace and paint the north side fascia board and repair the ends of the two eaves on each end of the community hall. And the guy had got back to me and said that he needed to go up $200 on that if he wanted that done. You guys tabled it kind of last month until I found out how much his original bid was. Paul Nyrens and I met out here one day, and we looked it all over and discussed it and different things, and it sounds like it's pretty close in the ballpark what it would cost to replace that. Because that was all rotten last year. They just put some paint over it just to cover it up, and we hadn't had that figured in there. But it's something that will have to be done here.
Do we need so did we approve the original $1,000?
Yes.
Yes.
He was supposed to come back in the fall, but it got cold so quick that he didn't get back. So now he's telling me he needs an extra $2,000.
An extra $2,000?
I mean, an extra $200 to do that.
Do we need a overseer's vote on that, or is that so then?
I know for a fact that lumber prices have gone up, because I just had some work done on my buildings, and that's not unreasonable. So I make a motion that we approve the increase.
Seconded by Vicki. Any discussion? Paul?
Bill is of the opinion that the contractor agreed to repair the butt ends on the north side of the rafters.
Yeah.
So if that's included, I'm okay with it.
And I'm gonna double check to make sure. I know when I talked to him, we were gonna cut out the rotten part on the ends and put new back on the end. But I will double check, make sure that all that's done and that before we go ahead. That's too much.
We're at 1,200 now. Any further discussion? All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you.
While he's up there, can you fix the screen?
Yeah.
He possibly could, yeah, he had tall enough ladders, because he had to get up there to paint the trim, so he might be able to put a screen up there for us. I don't know, that's gonna be in my purview, I think it'll be that expensive, so. I'll look into that.
It's under $500 now, too.
Yeah.
Well, they had to get up and do the trim.
Let me take a look.
Last year.
Any further questions for Paul? For Bill? Sorry. Report of the office manager?
So what do you do in your spare time?
What's fair?
Amy?
Not much going on in the forefront.
You've got some changing times, I know.
There
in the near
is,
future.
yeah, I have a vacation that I had to cover for the post office, the 23rd, 24th, and 25th, which means I won't be here for that time frame. So what I was planning on doing is that Monday and Tuesday, doing 2 long days to hopefully be able to provide some office time to people in the village. So those 2 days I'm looking at doing like a 9 to a 7, so that on that Monday and Tuesday, which would be the 21st and 22nd.
Not next week.
19th, actually, the village will be closed, so,
Saturday,
yeah, Sunday.
19th is Saturday.
Oh, then the 20th.
Sunday.
Yeah.
Give that request.
Oh, for the yoga? Yeah, I actually had mentioned, I think it was last month or the month before, 'cause she had called in,
That was
and I
your
got
list.
the paperwork, yeah, the other day to make sure that that was all in. And I was telling Vicki that all of the Bayside Arts, the yoga, the dance classes, all of those that I've gotten in, all work perfectly. There's no conflicts in times or dates or anything, so.
Is there a schedule yet for Bayside Arts?
That's the same
they
I
thing.
haven't seen it at all.
Yeah, they didn't actually send out a list like they did last year where it went boom, boom, boom. I mean, I have all of the information right here.
But you just have dates without
Right,
knowing what's happening on those dates.
right. I have, and they tell me what's going to be happening on the actual form.
And that's what I asked Amy, are they supposed to bring that and just get our approval for whatever they're planning? I'm not sure what seems to me the last year,
Well,
they came in and told us what they were, I don't think they really need our, I don't know.
we're not charging them.
Right, it's just they reserve places, so it's not necessary for us to know what's
Is
going on.
John our contact there?
Yeah, John's the one that's been filling out all the paperwork and sending in all the forms.
So could you do me a favor, please? Could you send John an email or note and ask him to send whatever list he has to the overseers,
Yeah.
to the group?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just, so it comes from the office, and we're eager to know what
Yeah.
the schedule is. Paul?
I just wanted to mention that somebody needs to review the payments made to K and K. It seems to me that there's more, I don't have a calculator, so I couldn't verify, but it seems to me there's more checks than there are invoices. K and K.
I know that we've gotten, what, 2 or 3 of them.
Well, somebody ought to just, okay. Look into the calculator.
Anything else, Andy?
That gets split 3 ways.
You know, Tony, since you're here, why don't we bump up the report of the tree warden's announcements?
Okay.
You not have to force you to sit through these other reports. So Tony, take it away.
Well, first of all, this is a side note. Dottie, who lives with my dad, found about 5 postcards from 1920 or earlier from Bayside. She wanted to donate them. I don't know what happens to them.
Get a baby, she did.
Yeah.
But there's a post date on there for 1929 on one of them, so they're old. Anyway, tree warden, that I think I know Vicki, and she wasn't here last time. You were on the phone last time. We had 5 trees that were scheduled to be taken care of, one being personal and property danger, immediate. That one was not completely cut down, but it's safe now. They came and latched it and cut off all the weight on it.
Where is that?
The one by the jail. There's 3, there was
Jail?
the jail on Griffin Street. So there was 3 trees that needed to be done there. 2 of them are completely cut down. They were rotten all the way through. I mean, they were out of those 2 trees on the side, there was no wood that could be taken out of it, or very little. They're going to come back to finish the 3rd tree there, but they need to get a crane. They don't have a crane. Green's Tree Service is very good, but they changed management. His father basically gave the business to his son, and his son's having growing pains on how to organize and do that thing. But they're very, very organized once they get to the site. That cost is going to be $2,000 for that whole job. I have the, as soon as they finish it, they know it's gonna take a couple weeks to do the invoice to the office and everything, and I said, as soon as they give me the invoice, I'll start that. Question for the board, we have 2 other trees that come in there. I've had a couple people find out that I'm a tree warden, I don't know who's been talking, but there are a couple people who want the wood from the trees, and I can do a little bit of horse trading. Do we want the money that they get to go straight, to come out of the cost for the tree service, or do you want the corporation to get that money and then pay the other? How?
They're willing to pay it?
Not for the whole thing. They're willing to, like, for one tree, they're willing to say, we'll give you $300 for that. Do we want to take the $300 off of what the tree service is paying us and pay them that way, or? I mean,
You
that's
actually
completely
said
up to
there are 5 trees, and that's coming to $2,000, am I correct?
No, that's for the 3 trees.
3 trees is
We have not
2,000.
gotten estimates on the other 2 trees.
So 700 or so a tree, roughly.
No, well, that's not really good.
I'm averaging it out. So if someone gives us $300 for wood from a tree,
Well, that has to be a big, pretty big tree, because it's $300 a cord, so.
Do we want to get into that?
I mean, that's.
I'm saying, do we really want to get into, we got lots of trees that come up and down, do we really want to start selling wood? First, let's decide that. Do
We've
we?
always donated it.
Exactly, that was my thought. If
Okay,
somebody
we just wanted to.
Anybody could take the wood who was willing to get rid of it, and get it out of the way.
Okay.
But the question's on the table. Do we want to start selling wood?
I'd say no, that might be.
Well, I'd say yes.
well, you guys figured it out.
If somebody's willing to pay, apparently there's getting to be oils going up. So heating fuel's gonna go up. If we can get some money for something, we're more than willing to spend tax money.
I'm inclined to take money to the board too.
I think we should take the money and set it aside for a lobster bake. Overseers this summer.
Oh, we can buy pickup trucks for the mail overseas.
Vicki,
Okay, it sounds like we're in favor of taking money. Instead of getting into a whole thing there, what I would like is for the newly formed tree committee to come up with a protocol instead of hashing it out here,
Thank you.
which will eliminate Tony's need to horse trade.
thank you.
And we will move forward until, we have another question.
I agree, in the short term, since there does seem to be a majority around the table who's willing, if said people are willing to write a check to Northport Village Corporation, we would set it aside and I suspect end up using it to knock down the costs that we have to for trees.
And I would not try to take it off the bill. We'll pay the bill for
Okay,
grants.
that was a big question.
And then the income is we'll take care of that, so it simplifies.
Exactly.
We're not gonna get a third person involved, we have a hard enough time trying to get three
Make
people.
the checks out to cash.
Thank you very much for that, and I agree the committee should create a protocol for this.
Okay.
Okay, the one tree down, I don't know where it's off it's in a little park that needs to come down. Let's put it this way, one of the trees that needs to come down, I'm gonna have to get either the power company or somebody else involved, because there's no way to bring that tree down without.
Where is it?
The tree people do that. You don't have to get them into, that's the tree people's job. And the tree people, there are tree people that are licensed to work around power lines and not licensed. But I think that's the tree people.
Okay, well, if that might come up, I don't
If it
know.
comes
I
up.
just know, I looked at the tree and I said, there's no way that can come down without.
Where is it, Tony? Where is it?
It's the one at the end of this road that has to be plowed. Where is that tree?
So you're down in Auditorium Park.
Right, it's on the corner bottom.
There's one down
Right
in the
outside
back of
of
the
Auditorium.
house.
It's a very big tree and it's triangled by cords.
So from a cost saving standpoint, you can call CMP and they may come and just take it down. So again, from a
Right.
cost
That's
Okay,
where I was
yeah.
leading with that if it comes down to it being a problem,
trust you to be resourceful, Tony.
Okay.
And you have
I'll
the
just
full
say, we might
authority
get a
of this
free
board.
tree out of it, was what I was trying to get at.
And I don't know, Bill, have you done that in the past?
I will say down in there that the phone company, the power company won't touch that. Those aren't primary wires in there, those are what they call secondary or third-area wires.
Okay.
Only the wires that have a lot of power in them that they worry about. But Vicky is right, it's up to the tree company, that's their problem. And some tree companies aren't licensed to work in, there's a certain zone around power lines that tree companies work in. Some people are not qualified to do that. So you have to make sure that they've got the qualifications to work around power lines.
I will take that into account.
And because of the, the danger involved, no guy who's not qualified would probably really go in there anyway. So the question is, are they licensed to work around? It's a specific license.
Wendy?
So I don't want to micromanage, but if Tony wants to call CMP and for any of the trees that might be near power lines and see if they will take them down,
Right.
I think it's up to you to decide how to manage.
Okay.
That's what John says.
Any other questions?
No, but since Judy is not here, on her behalf, I know that she would be saying that for trees that are coming down in public space, we need to remember that a tree needs to go up in that vicinity for each tree that comes down. So I'm just saying that because if she were here, she would be saying that. And so if we're talking about taking down a tree in Auditorium Park, or the trees up near the jail.
I think there's going to be a discussion of that.
That's
so.
Fabulous. That's all. I have a question. The tree that has now come down, thank goodness, in Ruggles Park, finally to the ground, is that stump coming out sometime, anytime? Do we know?
I don't think it's planned to do anything to it that I know.
I know the stump on the road, we decided to keep in a sort of memorialized way because that was a significant tree. Now we have a new stump about 20 feet away going downhill. The intent is to keep that as a stump also?
No, nobody decided on to do anything with it.
We could grind it.
It needs to be stumped down.
I would like for
For a couple
the
$100.
tree committee to think about that, please. Anything else, Tony?
Questions? So as I understand, there were 5 trees that are somehow in discussion.
Right.
3 of them are gonna cost us about $2,000,
Right.
and we have not paid that yet. I haven't seen invoices.
No, we have not paid that.
And what's your best guess about the next 2? It doesn't have to be right, I'm just trying to make sure.
I would say the one where all the boats are at, that will be probably $500-600. The other one, I wouldn't even venture to guess, because I wouldn't know how to do it with my limited knowledge. Usually it's, okay, it can go that way.
Yeah.
This one's gonna have to come straight down or move power lines or something. But I would probably guess, I would probably put it in the range of the first tree up by the jail at $1,500.
So 2,000 for the 2 of them.
Right.
Yeah, that's fine, it's a placeholder for me, so at least I set money aside.
Right, and that falls in line with the early estimate that was done. That was done in January. That falls in line, and somebody had looked at those 5.
And there's nothing else we have pending right now. We haven't really approved tree replacements, we haven't approved stump grinding. All stuff likely to happen, but it's,
But there were 2 trees that Benner had, but did they take those 2 trees down?
Bennett took the one down in Ruggles
The one.
Park, and he's supposed to come back soon to prune out all the dead wood in the one as you go into Bayview Park.
But they've already been paid for all that.
Not that.
Not
They
that.
only got paid for the one in Ruggles Park.
and they haven't taken it down yet.
It
No,
has been.
It's gotta be pruned.
Okay, so what additional costs we have coming to them?
I don't know what that's gonna be for pruning.
Yes.
It's
It's
like
going to be mine.
probably 500 or a little
So
more.
do we just answer it here?
Yeah.
You just answer it here.
Thanks. Thanks, Tony. Appreciate it.
Kaz,
Question.
the
Mike?
initial amount approved for the
Hey,
taking down
good,
the
hi.
trees, 10,000, did we set that aside?
Welcome to the meeting.
Still in residual.
3.
3,000, did you say? Huh?
We're just finishing up with Tony Field's tree warden report. I bumped that in front of the committee reports, and we've just been talking about trees.
Okay, great. If I drop out, I'll call back. We're in the woods, guys.
You're in the woods somewhere?
Yeah, Connecticut, guys. So if I drop out, I'll call you back.
Okay, thank you. We're just starting committee reports then, and I suspect we'll be to you quite quickly, because Judy has the first three and Judy's not here. Communications, is there anyone else who wants to, is anyone on that committee besides Judy? I don't think so. Finance committee, anyone else besides Judy reporting? And governance committee,
We had the public meeting, last meeting
yes.
in April, and there were basically two concerns raised by residents. One was on fire pits near, I think it stated within 75 feet of any structure, and some people from out of the village core, where the spacing is much greater than it is in the core village, felt that denied them the use of their own fire pits. So we changed the wording from any structure to a neighboring structure, 75 feet from a neighboring structure. Feeling that this still protects the village core. And if people want to endanger their own building, that's their issue.
Yeah, but it can spread.
I know, but, and the second issue was burning of brush, and we added a line or a paragraph about brush burning. Basically, you have to be 75 feet from a neighbor's property, and you need a town permit for brush. And there was some thought that, John, you were going to take that frequently asked questions thing and upgrade that to the latest configuration.
And there was also, I think the reason I haven't presented at this meeting is I thought that because Judy wasn't here, there was a feeling of wanting to bring all that together at the June meeting. Am I
I
correct?
think that's correct, yes. Yes, I was just trying to get
Right.
kind of an upgrade as to where we stand.
Any questions for Dick on this? Yeah, I believe that the sense was that the permitting issues were all staying. It was the language regarding distance from abutting neighbors and how that were the only significant changes we had. Infrastructure Committee, Mr. Lannon, I'm going to hand it to you. You've sent around two wonderful documents regarding the wharf and the roads. We've had a little bit of discussion in terms of the bottom line numbers of those. Is there anything particular you'd like to report on?
Well, I think I'm going to start with the electrical.
Okay. And Bill, just to let you know, Mike, I asked Bill to talk a little bit about that because it was a smaller issue, it seems. So he indicated he's going to circle back to some of the electricians who had asked for the RFP and see if they'd be interested in doing work in the fall.
Oh, that's great, yeah, so then we're all done with that. I mean, I think the only thing I wanted to say was, and Bill can chime in, obviously, but I don't think it was really related to anything other than these folks are really busy right now doing new installations, and they'd rather do those than these, so I don't think it was anything with the way we set it up, it's just that they're very busy right now, so I feel like we've sort of satisfied the public bidding portion of it. And now it's down to the point where as soon as we can get somebody who's willing to do it, we're going to do it. And you know, I don't think we need to necessarily bid it. Are we in agreement on that?
I think, yes. There's heads nodding around the table.
Yep.
Okay, good. Great. So that's really all I wanted to mention on that. And you're absolutely right. Lily's on top of that. Okay?
Keep going.
All right, great. So then let's talk about the York. We had a meeting I'm sorry, let's talk about the seawall. We had a meeting with the seawall people, we kicked that off. And essentially, they got a good idea of what we're looking for. We did a lot of showing them around and showing them around Bayside and how important aesthetics are to people. They should be by in the next 2 weeks to do the field survey. They're going to shoot some elevations off the wall. They're also going to pick up a few points along the lower Maple and lower Main Street as required in the scope of work. Because what we really want to include anything that's going to impact parking is going to be included sort of in the scenario, because we want to make sure that that's there. So they are looking at that also, and we should have some progress with that to report by the next meeting. The next topic would be
Mike, before you move on, just one question for me. Are we still on track in terms of our schedule for a public meeting based on their recommendations and then heading towards the August annual meeting?
Yes, we had pushed things out a month, so their submittal is actually a month further out than what we had required in the scope of work, and that was at our request because we felt at the last meeting that the timeline would have been too soon in the sense that there wouldn't be enough people in Bayside yet to have the meeting, and we wanted to make sure we have enough people involved. So we did push it out a little bit, and with that, we are still on track.
Thank you. That's all.
Any other questions?
I see none around the table. Keep going.
All right, great. So the next thing would be the wharf. We took a look at the wharf maintenance program, the wharf inspection report, and developed sort of this proactive approach. I think I haven't been around Bayside as long as a lot of you all have, but all I know is that ever since I've been here, everybody refers to the wharf as the new wharf. Obviously, from the pictures I see throughout the community hall and everywhere else, it's not the first wharf, it won't be the last wharf, but I think the important thing is it's no longer really the new wharf. It's been there for not years, but decades now, and it has started to show its age, not in the sense of it being unstable or insecure, but in the fact that it does need regular maintenance at this point to keep it up to date and to keep it from loosening up. So our goal here is really, I think, to switch from sort of a reactive mode to a proactive mode, and this was something that Steve, the wharf inspector, also sort of talked to us a little bit about. So I think the idea is going forward, we would actually replace the bolts in a 5-year cycle. And that way, as things start to loosen, we won't be replacing them after they've loosened and then been hit by that extra storm. They would be replaced on a regular basis. It's really going to come down, I think, mostly to the cost of extra nuts and bolts, because if you want to, right now it's, we've got to replace those, not those, and this, and there's a big plan of which ones are we replacing and everything. I think once it gets much more systematic, it'll be much easier to just really have almost an assembly line of taking them out and putting them back in. That's the goal anyway. And if we do that, I think we'll end up with a much longer lifetime of this wharf. So that's sort of the board, the infrastructure committee's recommendation. And I'd love to find out if anybody has any questions.
Before you called in, Steve, our treasurer, handed around a sheet that had called tax implications for the 2019 budget. And on that, he's assuming that starting in 2019 and thenceforward, there'd be a roughly $4,000 a year cost. It rises and falls which assumes about an $11.31 increase on a $250,000 valuation per year. So the assumption is that this would come, we don't know where the money is for this yet, but this is what you're saying is the recommended, that we need to make these expenditures on an annual basis.
Yeah, I mean, if we go down the road, we're gonna be replacing the work much sooner. Now, if someone had asked, when is that going to be, I think the issue we have is, we don't know, because as it continues to loosen up, it's gonna be storm related. It's not gonna be something that we can predict, but if we do this, I think everyone can agree that, we should be able to, ride this work, the life of it a lot more. So, yes, there will be cost implications, so we can discuss that.
Also, I happened to run into Gordon Fuller last night, and he asked if you could please send a copy of this report to him. And I think that's appropriate.
Oh, absolutely, yes. And I did CC send it to the village office, so really anybody can take a look at it.
Right. Thank you. Any questions from the overseers regarding the work report?
Hey, Mike, this is Steve. We have, one of my recommendations is that you may be able to start early on road projects and the preventative maintenance for the wharf based upon the carryover from last year.
Okay.
So I'm trying to pull numbers together to find out exactly what we still have available. But I think that's great. The letters were very, very helpful to me. I think it's the right approach, and funding it becomes a question.
Yeah, I know, and that's why you wanted these, so you could start thinking about how we will work these in, obviously.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike.
Yep. So the next one is the road budget. We're going to try to take a longer view of the road in Maytag, and our first half year is really 2 years out, and I think Billy and I would like to get it to be, sort of 2 or 5 years out in the long run, but I think this is a good place to start, because we can't get too bogged down, because there's always things that change as we go. But I think what we looked at was that there are a lot of these smaller roads that seem to be each year sucking up a larger percentage of his annual budget that he has to spread around to so many different things. For example, on Upper Maple Street, we have probably 3 loads of gravel going down this year, and that's just a maintenance number, assuming that some of this stuff is approved. If it's not approved, and this was sort of, we were going to try to fix it, it'd be even more. So I think it's, the gravel, putting more gravel down has a lot of implications. Obviously, if we have to put it down, it went somewhere. So we have to clean up where it went, which is a lot of it's on Lower Maple right now, and in the storm drains and in the ditches. And then obviously the cost of actually putting it down and grading it and compacting it and so on. So we looked at some of these roads that are less traveled, and I think if you ask the average person in Bayside, they'd probably say, why do we need to even deal with this? And I think, obviously we need to deal with it for safety reasons, and also it's not reasonable to allow some of this water to run off into, for Upper Maple, it's running off into George Street in the winter and freezing. For Oak Street, there's a spring there on the side of the road that seems to keep that area moist at all times, and that's sort of creating a problem with that road. And then we have over at West Street and Upper Clinton, we have runoff that runs down and across George Street and into some of the houses nearby, and all those things kind of need to be addressed. When we were out in the field, it appeared that Dean and Billy have some magical solutions that will work temporarily for West Street, trying to divert some of that water into the ditches and keeping it out of the folks on George Street. So, we're looking for a budget for 2019 and 20, so he thinks he can do that one for this year and maybe, and, you know, obviously for next year or two to get it started before we ever got into that budget. So that we kind of are focusing more on the first two, which is the upper Maple Street and the Oak Street issues at this time. There's no intention to pave these roads through these budgets. These budgets are simply to put in better drainage ditches, to divert the water from the roadway, which is running down the center of the roadway, for example, on Upper Maple, towards these ditches and into the existing ditches, down George Street and on its way. And then to apply the right amount of gravel in the surface. One of the other advantages, I think, of coming up with these multi-year plans is we'll be able to talk to the residents of these roads well in advance and let them know of these paving modifications so they can plan accordingly with their landscaping and so on, because there is a lot of landscape creep, as we know, on these dirt roads, because there's no real delineation between the roadway and the property.
Okay, let me just,
The road right of way runs right up to the edge of the structure, so almost all of it is owned by the village. But we will have to talk to them about that. And there's one issue on Upper Maplewood Park. So those are our recommendations for right now for 2019 and 2020. And then in 2021, we anticipate that there will probably be another dirt road, and by that time that we would need to do some major drainage repair to. But we don't know what it is, so I was throwing that budget out just for future planning purposes. And then we also are discussing the possibility of paving Upper Main Street at that time.
got it, thank you. There's a question here from Lee.
This past winter, I had similar problems with my driveway to my milk house. It's quite steep. It was washing out on both sides and running down alongside the main road, which was paved. And every year I had to scoop up a lot of the gravel that had washed off the road. So I asked the fellow who hauls me sawdust every week, he deals in that. I said, what can I put other than gravel on that road to keep it from washing down the driveway all the time? He said, well, there's two different kinds of stone dust that has two different types of gravel in it. And luckily, I picked the right one, because he brought it. Once he put it down and I leveled it off with my skid steer, I plowed that all winter long and I couldn't plow the gravel off. It stayed there all winter. And I would recommend using something like that instead of just putting gravel on, which ends up in the storm drains anyway.
Yes,
Great mix.
I think Billy can chime in regarding this, but we were actually talking about this. The particular quote gravel that Dean has been using more recently does pack down really nice and does create a surface that almost looks paved at times. Billy, can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Further, the fellow who brings me sawdust will come next week, and I'll ask him for the particulars, because there's two different types. And the type he brought me works well. He said the other type, he hadn't had as good luck with.
Is the one.
Right, and Billy, you were talking about that, right?
I don't know.
They're having a side conversation on this. I think that, Bill, is there anything particular you want to add to this?
No, all I was just asking him whether that stuff that he has cement dust, cement, like bagged cement dust put in with the gravel, so when it gets wet, it acts kind of like cement as a binding agent. I know that some people are starting to do that.
A quick question, Mike. On your road memo, you say Billy, Dean, and I explored. Who is Dean?
Brown.
Dean is the fellow who does a lot of the repair work.
Thank you.
To our roads right now. And he would be the one that we would propose to use for this work.
Excellent.
We did each road one at a time. I don't think the amount is such that we would necessarily need to go out and bid it, but that's something we can discuss.
Okay, also, Steve made note that our budget workshop is scheduled for Saturday, June 16th at 8 a.m. That's the day before our next meeting. Are you going to be able to attend that budget workshop?
What day is that?
Saturday, June 16th at 8 a.m., the day before our next overseers meeting.
Yes.
Thank you. Question from Paul?
Well, I have a couple of comments I wanted to make. After our infrastructure committee meeting the other day, I went and looked at Upper Maple and Oak Street.
Can you speak up a little bit, Rob?
I looked at Upper Maple and Oak Street, Mike, and came to a couple of conclusions from my observations. On Upper Maple Street, it seems to me that the grade, there's kind of a nebulous grade there. I think if we grade it, it would help tremendously. If we grade it so the runoff pitches to the south, it can run into the catch basin under the mailboxes. We can't really grade to the north because you've got water service shutoffs right there in the travelway, right just before the stairs, the flower lady's house, as Bill calls it. So I'm not sure we can remove those stairs either because of the grade change. So that's one thing I noticed about Maple Street. And then on Oak Street, it seems to me that we've got some severe ditches on the north side, and the road itself kind of turns slightly so that the runoff from the road impacts the purple house at the very end, and to the point where it's affecting the underpinnings of that house on the main part of the house and on the porch. I think if we redirect the tail end of that street, and if we pitch the grade there too towards the park, I think that would mitigate things significantly. That's all I have.
Yeah, no, that's all good stuff. I think the important thing here is I don't think we're set on any particular design at this point. We were looking at what we think it would cost to do sort of one particular design, and I think that's a good budget number for this. But I think that it's going to involve some of the neighbors. There's one, obviously pushing this out for a year or two, discussing it in advance, we can involve them and make sure that everybody's sort of happy with that. I agree with you that there are multiple ways to do this, so we should talk about which one is the best one that we go.
Well, I think we're doing damage to the Oak Street property, or off the tail end of the Oak Street road. If anybody goes and looks, you'll see that the road curves and is directed right at that house. And I'm sure a lot of the runoff is damaging that house.
There's a culvert right there that goes down.
There is a culvert.
Yeah.
Right, but the road still aims directly at the house. So you get maybe some water caught in the culvert, but a lot of it's going into the house.
Wendy?
John, I'm just curious if this level of detail isn't better for the infrastructure committee
I agree.
instead of the overseers?
I think the infrastructure committee can take this up.
Of course, Wendy, but it's for discussion.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, we'll talk about that. And again, that's the point is we need this budget, and then we can come up with the best way to address this.
Right.
Involving everybody involved.
Right. Mike, I have a question for you, which is that you created two documents, one about the roadway recommendations and the other about the wharf recommendations, both of which seem to be significant in terms of public awareness. Would you be comfortable, and is the infrastructure committee comfortable, if I took these two documents as you've written them exactly, and just put them on NBC letterhead and said, these are memos from Mike Lannon, and literally reproduce them so that Dan could put them up on the website, because it seems that there's material here that the public would want to know about. And I put that up to you and to the infrastructure committee.
Yes, I think that once I send a meeting, a memo like this to Northport village office. I believe it's public information, that's perfect. We can definitely formalize it on letterhead, or we can even just have copies of these emails, whatever you feel is appropriate.
If the rest of the committee is comfortable with that, I'd like to do that just because of these are, you know, multi-year significant documents, and I think a lot of work has gone into them. And while some people watch the videos, some people, you know, attend the meetings, relatively few, and I think a lot more people would pay attention if it were distributed through Dan's website. So I will take that, I'll take care of that. Any other questions for Mike at the moment? Seeing none, we're going to move along. Mike, we hope you can stay with us, if you can.
Yeah, I did have one more item,
Yep.
and that is, I forwarded an email from Dan Bissett regarding internet availability in the village, and he mentioned that there is some sort of new line, and I'll be the first to admit right now, this is not my area of expertise, but it does sound like infrastructure. It does not need to be handled by the infrastructure committee. Someone should look into the possibility of whether or not this new system should be diverted towards the village.
This is news to me. If you say you forwarded an email, I didn't see it. I don't know what you're referring to.
Oh, I saw it.
Yeah, it did go. So I'll comment on this. This is my area of expertise. Dan's been trying to get me to do it for quite a while. So, you know, I think it's fine if it's in the infrastructure committee, if we want to have a discussion about it at some point in time. Basically, there's an opportunity to do a community network. It's not free. There's definitely a cost to it. Alsborough, Rockport, a number of other communities in Maine have done that.
And the
Okay, well, that's your area of expertise. Is this worth exploring, or should we just say that, you know, it's going to be a cost and that we're not interested? I have no idea.
So I think that there are some people in the community who are interested in it, given that some of the current network connectivity that we have in the village is not very good. The density of our community lends itself to actually do this type of activity. John and I wouldn't say looked into this, but there are often grants at the state level. I think last year there was a $500,000 grant that we could go after to do this type of thing. So again, I think that it's probably worth discussion at some point, but it really is a matter of, is it a priority for the community and who has the cycles to look into it?
The cost would
All right,
vary.
then we'll keep this on the list of things to explore and look at it over time. Obviously, it's way too late to do anything for this particular season anyway, so I don't think it's a high priority, but I'll put together a little committee of people that want to look at it, and do you have any ideas from the overseas who would like to be involved in that? Would you like to be involved with it?
Sure. I put George Allen on it as well.
Oh, that's a good idea, absolutely, yeah.
I think if members of the public want to drive this investigation, that's perfectly fine.
I'd like to get an understanding of what we should anticipate in the way of cost. Is that something that the village would absorb, or would the subscriber absorb?
We don't know at this point.
At this
We
point.
I mean,
have no idea yet, that's the thing.
So,
Okay.
Mike and I can address it. There are lots of different ways of doing it. So, again, I think it has to be, if there is a demand in the community, then it's something worth looking into. But if people aren't interested, then, you know, we'll waste the time.
Exactly. Thank you. Anything else, Mike?
No, that's it for now, thanks.
Thank you. Safety Committee, Wendy.
Okay, I'll try to be quick. So we do have 2 lifeguards. We do believe that they're both getting their waterfront certification. Evan needs his renewed. Mackenzie has signed up for hers, so I think we're good. We'll be having the 7 days a week, 7 hours a day of coverage starting. I think that's Monday, June 25th, I think is the date that we're looking at starting. Probably going through Labor Day, just so that we have the coverage with probably not the full 7 days a week, 7 hours a day at the end of August, because we know that the sailing program's over and it's lighter people in town because school is back in session. We continue to look for a police officer. I've exchanged email with Deputy Chief Jason Trundy at the Waldo County Sheriff's Department. They do not have any extra cycles, but he was going to publicize it with his police officers to see if anybody wanted to pick it up on their own. They also referred us to a professor who runs the police safety program at Unity College. Beanie is following up with the professor to see if we can maybe get a student who has the appropriate certifications to be the officer for the summer. So we're making progress on that. One of the things that I think as John puts together this discussion about sort of developing the NVC employees, I think that we should actually pull in the hiring process, at least the recruiting, the job ads, things like that, to be an office function and not to be a volunteer function. So I'm just putting it out there that I think it should be investigated. I also think, assuming we have a police officer this summer, that the logs and some of the management of the police officers should come out of the office and not be through the volunteers. We had some issues last year. I think from a liability standpoint that it is better if it is contained within the village office and not delegated out to volunteers. So I did, as Steve mentioned, I did provide a safety budget. I aligned the budget with what we have decided in regards to lifeguard hours and pay, as well as police hours and coverage. One of the things I did assume was a slight increase in raise for the lifeguards from $15 an hour to $15.50. That only increases the budget 30 hours per week. I'm sorry, $30 for the year. I have reduced the police coverage to 30 hours a week at $30 per hour. That stays us within what the previous budget was. One of the things that the overseers have been discussing, and again, we can discuss this at the budget meeting, is adding additional fire hydrants. Currently, I believe, and Steve, please correct me on this if I'm wrong, but I believe that there are currently 2 rentals in the budget. I know one is for the Ruggles Park hydrant. I don't know where the second hydrant is.
Amy could give us better information there. I know one is split between sewer and general government at the treatment plant.
Okay.
One is Ruggles Park. And then I think we're paying, there seems to be, and I know we've got a school one.
But we charge them, the utilities company charges the school, I believe,
Yes,
for that
yes.
rental. So that in the NVC budget, we're only currently paying for 2 hydrants.
Amy?
And that's what you gave me in the information that you sent me, that it's 2 hydrants that we pay for. So I'm assuming it's the sewer and Ruggles Park, and I will confirm that with her. So what in the safety budget, what I put in there is a placeholder for up to 2 new hydrants and $897 per year for the hydrant rental. I also did put in $1,500 for the removal of one of the old fire pond hydrants. I'm under the impression that it's actually the village corporation who's responsible for those. Steve, you mentioned that you think the utilities company is responsible for that. I think we need to get that just resolved, because the information I got at the utilities meeting, which you weren't at, was that they're owned by the...
Yeah, I mean, I'll gladly take a look. The last time I investigated hydrants, to the best of my memory, all that was carried as an asset in utilities.
So again, there is a $1,500 charge to remove the old hydrants. What the utilities company is recommending is that every time we place a new hydrant within, a certain distance of one of the old fire pond hydrants, that the old fire pond hydrant is removed as well, in order to avoid any risk of cross-contamination between the fire pond water and our portable water. So again, that can be discussed at the budget meeting in June. So that's it.
Yeah, I don't think those 2 systems are interconnected.
Yeah, so,
By taking the old ones out, that's what we're trying to avoid.
But it's not connected now, right?
no. It's only in the case of a fire that if they both were used,
pull from both directions.
then it could be problematic, and then if we ended up with a contamination in the portable water, it could be a huge risk for both the utilities company as well as the village corporation. And so for, again, $1,500, it seems prudent, even though hopefully it never happens, it seems prudent to actually do that. So that was it for me for safety.
And the installation of the new hydrants, they would go where?
And we can discuss that in utilities. It would be up to the overseers to decide when and where they wanted to put the hydrants in. The recommendation is that you put it on an existing stub that will support a fire hydrant, and do not ask us, to the utilities company, to add additional stubs to the system. And there are 12 locations where you could actually put fire hydrants. And again, from a safety standpoint, the safety committee has talked about it, the utilities company has talked about it. Given that the pressure will withstand multiple fire hydrants, it just seems as a prudent, safe thing to do is to add hydrants as we can afford it in the budget.
Should we have for the rest of the overseers to see a map showing the 12 stubs?
So we have asked for that. The utilities company will provide that map, and when we get to the point where we want to decide that. And these can be two separate things. Putting it in the budget can be separate from actually deciding on where you're going to put them. And this is the next year's budget. So again, as overseers, we could decide whether we wanted to do one this year, one next year. But for budgeting purposes, I just put in what it would cost for two, assuming that we might want to do that.
Paul?
Do we need to vote on any of these pay raises?
We already did.
I believe we did, and it's a change of $30 in the year.
That's just next year. So this year,
Next
we voted for the up to $30 an hour for the police officer, and we voted for $15 an hour for the lifeguard. So for planning purposes for next year, I put in just a small raise for the...
What about the hydrants? Have we voted on that yet?
Again, that's for next year's budget.
Right, she's giving us suggestions for next year.
The other question I had was, I didn't quite get an answer on my question about the remaining balance on the tree set aside that we established last winter.
Yep, bear with me one second.
Can we just finish the...
Let's just stay with safety. You won't be attending the budget workshop. Is that an issue? Will there be someone else from your committee there?
I can talk to them about it. I just can't get here in time.
I understand that. I'm just saying if
I provided the budget, so, we can certainly have discussion, or, I can answer questions between now and then. I will ask someone from the safety committee if they want to attend, but there's no guarantee that's...
Thank you. Steve, are we done with safety? Any other questions?
Yeah, and I'm not sure we need a safety committee member. Your budget's very straightforward. You've outlined everything that's going on.
Yeah.
And what we lose is your expertise for all the other stuff.
Yeah.
Any questions for the safety committee based on this report? Thank you. Now, Steve, you're going to answer. Paul.
Yeah, I'll give it a shot here. So,
Just an approximate, that's all.
$3,000.
That's what's left.
That's what, and this is foggy memory, you'd have to go back through all the overseers' notes. There was an original number of 10,000, it was put out as a placeholder, it wasn't used. My recollection is, and what I have here in documentation, is that we held aside an additional $3,000 for work we anticipated needing to do this year. Now, there's still more money out there. The overseers could conceivably approve additional funds toward trees. What I need to do for the next meeting that I referenced earlier is, we had expenses that I had no idea were in place. So Tony and $4,000 worth of trees that I'll factor into here. And that will just change what we have available, and then it's up to you guys to decide how you want to use it.
We've expended of the 10,000, to my recollection, 2,000 or 3,000 so far. Does that sound about right?
It's sort of apples and oranges. So the 10,000 was calendar 2017.
Well, it doesn't roll over.
And then the overseers made decisions that applied to 2018.
Yeah.
So in some cases, things roll over, in some cases, they don't. This was one that did not roll over.
No?
Wendy?
I think for the next meeting, it would be good to just have an accounting of some of this so that we can just see it on.
Yeah, well, as I mentioned before, the one that you got earlier this year hasn't changed. And the information I have today gives me the information I need to update it,
Right,
and I will provide that.
That'd be great.
Town liaison, Mr. Nyron.
Two things. basically. Drexel White is going to be finishing his term as selectman. He has no plans to return. We may get him on our infrastructure committee, our subcommittee, to help us with the roads and state grants and so forth. So that's one thing. The other thing is, people in Bayside should know that there's a plan after the town election, the town meeting, for, assuming it passes the meeting, for Bluff Road to be resurfaced from the golf course up to and beyond a little ways, the dirt area of Bluff Road. And that'll probably happen in August, presuming it passes the town meeting. And essentially, that's it.
Isn't that done relatively recently?
I don't know. Bluff Road hasn't been done in years.
Oh, really?
Part of it, up by the golf course.
That's it. Any questions for Mr. Nyra? Tree Planning Committee.
We have a meeting for Saturday, June 9th, and anxious to get started with all this tree talk. And I was going to talk to Steve about put something in the budget for trees, either cutting or planting them, just so we have something on the books. But other than that, hopefully after we have our meeting in June, we'll have more to report.
Excellent. Where and when is that meeting?
June 9th here at 9 o'clock.
Thank you.
Who is on the tree planting committee besides you?
I was going to bring my names. Myself, John Woolsey and Betty Woolsey, Jim Coughlin, Joel,
Tony Field, I hope.
and Tony. Yes, Tony's going to be part of it. And I think there's one other that name.
Well,
Mostly boys. So if any girls want to come.
you're right, it's at heaven, aren't you?
Any questions? Utility Committee, David Crowfoot.
So I'm providing the update there. So one of the things, and we're very proud about this, that for the past 3 months, we have met the highest standards of secondary treatment, so that it demonstrates the ongoing effectiveness of our treatment plant. So for the sewers, so we're very excited about that. As Billy alluded to earlier, we're just very busy right now. I mean, Billy is very busy, and I'm sure Amy is very busy fielding phone calls. This spring has been particularly difficult, both with the late start because of how cold it was to get the water meters and the water turned on, as well as all the construction that's going on within the village. So it just has been a lot of work, and we'd like to commend both Bill and Amy for all their hard work that they've done for the utilities company. We voted a pay raise for Fernie that's effective immediately. That'll be in the notes for the utilities meeting. And the other thing we did is we discussed the hydrants, as I reported earlier, from a safety committee standpoint. And as I mentioned, Bill and Dick know to get a copy of the system information so that we can see where the stubs are, so that the overseers can make a decision on when and where they want to put the hydrants in. So,
Paul.
Did the recorder in the vault get repaired?
it wasn't repaired, it was taken to be calibrated, and it's, it's very accurate, 98% accuracy, which is within the tolerance of what we're...
So it's working again?
The recorder has been replaced. The flow meter has been...
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So everything's hunky-dory
Yeah,
there?
everything's hunky-dory. Bill, do you want to...
The recorder has not arrived yet. It's on a slow boat from China.
Oh, slow boat?
It's in the process of being replaced.
In the process of being replaced.
Does that at all impact our ability to
No,
report out?
No, we still, there's another, I don't call it a transducer, but there's another system there that measures and stuff that Belfast gets and Dick gets his information on.
Paul?
Why is David Crowfoot listed on our list of committee reports?
He's the head of the committee,
He's not an overseer, and he never shows up. So why don't we make Wendy or Judy or somebody else,
I think because Wendy and Judy, I'm
Or
sure
Dick.
I can
or Dick?
I can talk for at least two of us, that we prefer to have David be the committee chair. And if there's any objection to me or Judy giving the report out, I'm sure we could ask David to come. I must say, I haven't seen the need for David to necessarily come to the meetings as the chair, since one of us can actually provide the report.
Well, I understand that, that's the way it's been going on for quite some time.
And
But why are we listing his name continuously and he never shows up?
Because he's the chairman.
He's the chair, so we list the chairs of the committees, even if the chair is not necessarily giving the report. If there is, among the
He's
overseers,
supposed to be an overseer.
it,
No.
No.
chair of the utility committee. If there's concern among the overseers that the person giving the report should always be the chair, then I'm happy to entertain that discussion among the overseers.
It just seems kind of unnecessary to list him where he's never here, he never gives a report.
it's just, so we're actually a board, and so he's the chair of our board. It's not actually a committee, it's a board. And so I believe the way that, at least, and again, we can talk about it in the utilities board, that the feeling was is that since three of us were actually overseers, that it was perfectly reasonable for one of the three of us to give the report. And so going forward, if you would like one of our names listed as providing the report out, I think we're perfectly happy to do that.
It just seems more sensible to me. Maybe I'm the only one, but he's never here.
And again, I'll state, I don't think that there was the expectation that he will be here.
No, I didn't expect it would be either.
Could, I think it's reasonable just to ask David if he cares about this or not. And if he says it doesn't matter to me at all, and why don't you just list one of your names, then I think we can move in that direction.
Yeah.
But let's ask him,
Yeah.
see what his opinion is.
Right, sensible.
Board of the Tree Warden we've already had. New and continuing business. Memorial Committee.
Oh, great, okay, so everybody hold on to your seats, okay? We're not leaving yet. So, I have 3 items as far as memorials and remembrances. As I discuss what Wendy and I went through, keep in mind that all of these things, if somebody comes and wants to have a remembrance or memorial for a loved one, they are all subject to overseer's approval for placement and whatever that might be, whatever their preference is. So we were first started with talking about the benches, and both agreed that some protocol for the benches, because now we're getting into the repairing of the benches, it'd be nice to have something in place. So as guidance for the overseers, for Bill when he's doing the repairs. And also, a couple things. A couple things about the remembrances. I think it's extremely, I think it's very lovely. It shows people, those of us that live here, those of us that visit, the significance of the community over the years to a lot of families and a lot of people. So the fact that those are there is very, very touching. Also, the benches provide a service to the community. People sit on the benches, and so the benches are we're very positive about the benches. Our proposal is that going forward, okay, first of all, we will take all the benches that are there now, and as overseers, the village will attempt to maintain them and repair them as needed. The exception being that we will no longer inscribe them. If an inscription was in the wood, we won't replace that. It would be replaced with a plaque. Who pays for the plaque can be discussed, but I think as far as historically, we as overseers might want to consider replacing the plaque, absorbing that cost. Going forward, no more wooden benches because they're too expensive to maintain. Granite, again, placement would be with the overseer's approval. Or the benches, the wooden benches can support multiple plaques. So somebody can say, I like that bench by the water, but I put, my plaque for mom on that bench. So the difference would be that, there would be the possibility of multiple plaques on the benches. And that covers the benches. Any questions, discussions, or thoughts?
Lee?
Usually when you have a memorial in towns, you have to pay for it. I'm wondering whether somebody wants to have a plaque on a bench, whether we shouldn't charge for it.
No, so the implication is we would, so,
Going forward.
and now people pay for the benches, but they don't pay for the maintenance on the benches. And so we still have to come up with what the pricing would be, but people would still make some sort of donation in memory, there would be a plaque. The amount that we would charge would, cover the bench and the plaque and, hopefully some level of, maintenance going forward. And I think that one of the things that Vicki talked about that I think is really important is that these benches do provide a service for the community. And I think placement should be based on where the overseers feel the benches will serve the community and not based necessarily on proximity to a place that might be significant to the person who's being memorialized, but not of service to the community.
So if a bench, as I understand what you're saying, if a bench previously cost, let's say, $500, we might, going forward, charge a number like $750 and say that extra $250 is for ongoing maintenance over time.
No,
Or some numbers, whatever the numbers
we're
are.
saying no more wooden benches. And the existing wooden benches we can maintain and future people can put a plaque on the bench.
So the new
But if they
benches,
wanted granite benches or something that didn't require maintenance, then placement would be placed in an area that provided service to the community.
so there's no maintenance concerns for new benches that are coming online, is that what I'm
If they're
hearing?
granite, yeah.
If they're granite, which will outlast us. Paul?
These benches are almost exclusively commemorative because I rarely see anybody sitting on them,
I must say, I disagree with you, Paul. I've seen a lot of them, the top of Bayview Park, I see people sitting there and looking at the water. I think the ones in Ruggles Park, a lot of people sit on them, especially some of the older people who don't want to sit on the grass. Vicki and I were talking yesterday, given the prevalence of ticks in
Well,
the
it's not-
community now.
It's not very pleasant to sit on a granite bench.
So where were you going with that?
The granite benches are uncomfortable. I think you need the wood benches, because people like to sit on. I agree that there's no maintenance, so we just need people to cover it.
So I guess we take that as a recommendation that we look at, allowing the wooden benches, but that we make sure we charge enough to put in a maintenance pot so that we can maintain them going forward.
I would second what Mr. Lennon says. I mean, if I were looking at two benches, one's wood and one's granite, I'll sit in the wood one every time.
Yeah, right.
And I suspect most people would. And so that's why I was wondering if you were saying, we'll put in a wooden bench and we're going to add a chunk on top of it, which will cover maintenance over time.
Yeah.
And that
So-
allows us to absorb
So
some of that cost.
why don't we take that as an action item for us to go back and look at what that model would be? And the other thing is, again, we'd have to figure out what the appropriate pricing model would be, but if you could put multiple plaques on a bench, then it allows you to, again, if you have a certain fee, say, okay, we're going to charge, $250, we'll put the plaque on, but that extra money is actually going to help maintain the bench. And again, we have to make sure that it seems fair, because if you're paying $750 for the bench and then somebody else is only paying $250 to put the plaque on, then it may not seem fair. So I think we need to understand what the model, the
It's going
cost
to be
model.
harder to put a plaque on a granite.
So I'm sorry, I was talking about a wooden bench.
No, I know, but
The public should understand, by the way, that these numbers that I created out of thin air, so it may be, I have no idea what final numbers may be.
We're not putting plaques on granite benches. We are trying to maintain the current wooden benches that were paid for by people who wanted to remember loved ones. So what do we do with them? Okay? There is a cost in maintaining them that wasn't addressed when all of this started, as far as I'm aware of. So we're trying to figure out what to do. So the current wooden benches, instead of tossing them when they are in total disrepair.
We also have people that are requesting other new memorial things, right?
We're gonna get to that.
We need to have.
So, Mike, we're gonna get to that, so.
Hang in there, Mike.
Okay, so we're not putting plaques. What we're doing is trying to give people an opportunity to have a remembrance. They don't have to incur the cost of a wooden bench or the maintenance of it. All they have to do is, if they would like the bench idea, have a plaque on a bench that they would then pay for.
Got it.
Okay, so we'll go back to the drawing board if people want more wooden benches. So this all started initially because we had a request to name the library after a past resident. And so we decided no renaming of the library.
I just have a comment. I went and looked at the memorial stones at the library, and I think the library, it doesn't actually have a name, which is fine. I just was a little surprised when I went and actually read what the memorials were in the library, that it was a little different than what I assumed.
I think I just already assumed it
Yes,
was the
thank you.
Samway Library. Yeah, is that?
It's the courtyard that's named after.
Without going, with a long history, but 1999, around 2000, there was an informal discussion with my family about naming the library. And my input at that time to the overseers, in an informal discussion, was that the community hall and the Bayside Library should not be named after anyone. And we said the community hall because at that time we were doing massive renovations. And so my answer to that, because the Samway family raised the money for the second edition, and again, it was an informal, do you want to have the naming? And we said no, because it should be the Bayside Library. And so that was the reason that the courtyard was had the dedication.
And I think understanding that better, again, I would go forward with that, and now we will put it in
Right.
in writing that it is the Bayside Library. And it currently has two memorials, one for Mrs. Samway and one for Mr. Pond under the tree, because apparently it had something, that land used to have something to do with the water district or something, and Sue
Yeah.
Ellen's dad worked, something like that. I had a quick conversation. So.
The pond started it.
Yeah, the pond started it, yeah, okay. So everybody agrees on that, no naming in the library, okay? So the options are, again, a memorial plaque, something like this or bigger. They come in all sizes, where there's a little brass plate that's engraved. Like, oh yeah, there we go, yes. There is a space inside the adult side of the library. There's wall space. Again, as overseers, we can absorb the cost of the frame, but if somebody wants to memorialize somebody, they could pay for the little brass plate. The other was somebody suggested naming a reading room after someone. And then in my travels through the internet, there are also things like what are there already, but there are also little garden plaques. You've seen them. But I think they might get stolen, you just stick them in the ground and it says in memory of. If you want to look at these, you want to pass them around. So there are some options there. It's just what we think we would want to do. I personally am in favor of the wall plaque, but you can get rocks with engravings on them, and generally the gardens around the library are really quite lovely. I guess my only thought is vandalism or something, I'm not sure about that.
Is this ad hoc committee going to issue a report with recommendations in terms of policy?
I think we should.
Yes, I think we should have a
So,
policy. Yes.
I think that based on the committee's recommendations, the overseers will then be able to make some decisions. And it sounds like that's still in process to some degree.
Well, we wanted to talk about these things to see if, first the naming, yes.
Well, I think that the intent of the committee, the intent is that the committee make recommendations upon which the overseers can then
So
make
we'll have
decisions.
for the next overseers meeting, we'll try to have a report that has
Thank
our recommendations. So there was just one final one that's sort of interesting. Tony brought this to us last meeting when Vicki wasn't here, is that people have been interested in memory of someone planting a tree. And that could be an interesting way of offsetting some of the costs associated with replacing some of the trees that we removed. So I think that that's also going to go in front of the tree planting committee. And often, again, when you plant a tree, you see like a plaque or a rock at the base of the tree that says who it's in memory of. So again, that seemed like a reasonable direction to go in. And so I think the outcome of what the recommendation will be is sort of guidelines in terms of appropriate ways to memorialize people here in the area that is consistent with sort of the function within the village as well, so that we're not putting benches places where we don't want them, or naming the community hall or the library after people, again, that we have sort of standards that we follow in terms of how we memorialize.
So I would request that whatever report you issue to the overseers, and take 2 months if you need 2 months, all right? Don't feel like it has to be next meeting. That there are two major buckets that I see. One is exactly described, which is policies and protocols across the village, what goes where, how do people get more, all that stuff. And the other one is the cost and the in perpetuity piece of it. Even a rock that sits underneath a tree with a plaque on it, in 15 years, or 8 years, may not look good. The rock gets chipped in. Do we replace the rock? And all the issues. So that other piece that we have to address. And so take your time on this. I'm serious about that. But I don't feel like it's clearly not as critical as some of the other matters we're addressing.
Right, and what's interesting is that there are a number of memorial rocks within the village that I don't think we've actually inventoried either. And so, I mean, the benches, I think, were the biggest, concern, because they are so visible, but I think you bring up a good point about the rocks. They do seem to be very durable, but, in another 50 years, that might not be the case.
Can I just add that at the library, there are a number of bricks that have not been printed. And I know that there was a discussion 2 years ago about using some of those, taking them out or printing them, either in memory of or in gratefulness or thanks or whatever, because I think either we did it or didn't do it for Dennis.
The Bayside Historical Preservation Society is actually doing the Centennial Walkway, so I'll get a report from them to see where that stands as well.
It was $100 per brick.
Pretty much.
They can do it individually, if they're doing an individual one. Okay, so we'll come up with a list of acceptable options, and how that's going to look like, and possible costs and where to go.
Thank you. Any questions for this ad hoc committee? Mr. Samway?
Just before you adjourn, can I
Jump in.
put a couple of things? One is, just before you adjourn, would you consider putting something in there that said resident comments on agenda items? In other words, you have questions from Bayside residents at the beginning,
Right.
but at the end, I'm just saying, just an open thing, that resident comments on the agenda items, that kind of, don't talk about anything that's on there, but that's just a suggestion. 3 things. One is, would you consider as an agenda item for the June 17th meeting, just putting in the preliminary discussions about the elections? I don't want to wait until July. The elections are going to be, we should discuss it, have a preliminary discussion. And the only other thing that I had on mine was, as a resident comment, is that I want to thank David Crowe for his incredible volunteer work and not to be criticized for not being at an overseers meeting. That's my resident comment.
I wasn't criticizing him. I was criticizing the format.
Vicki?
I did bring my tree committee folder, just for the record. Myself, Tony Field, Jim Kaufman, John Wolsey, Betty Wolsey, Joel Littman, and Michael Robbins. So it's actually quite a nice
Good
committee.
committee.
I think so, and all very interested, so I'm really looking forward to it, and it'll be interesting, because there's lots of stuff out there about trees.
And you heard my earlier comment, which is I hope this committee takes up the issue of, at least looks at the issue of stump removal.
Yes.
So, however you guys decide to move on. Any other new or continuing business? Next meeting is Sunday, June 17th. Does anyone here know if they will or will not be able to attend that meeting?
I'm away at a wedding, but is that when we start at 8 o'clock meetings? That needs to be noted.
Yes.
I'm in doubt as well.
You're,
I don't know if I'm going to make it or not.
okay.
So is it an 8 o'clock meeting? I'm sorry.
It is an 8 o'clock meeting. It follows the meeting the day before at 8 o'clock. The budget workshop is Saturday, June 16th, and the overseers meeting is Sunday, June 17th, and vote are at 8 a.m.
Okay, thanks.
Good to know.
Good to know, all right? Hearing no more continuing business, I declare this meeting over. Thank you all very much.